In Trump's words, he's getting Greenland one way or another. I'm curious your reaction, the way the U.S. is saying, we need this, we want it. I understand its strategic importance, but I'd like to get your thoughts on the way the administration's words and actions have been playing out so far.
Well, they've been playing out amongst his base as a welcome set of political signals. Of course, it aggrandizes the United States in the same way they talk about incorporating Canada as the 51st state. But amongst serious people, especially people who pay attention to security issues, I think there's some confusion why this is an issue. The United States has had a treaty with the Kingdom of Denmark since 1951, re-upped in 2004, and now we're hearing from the foreign minister that they're open to proposals about expanding the American base that already exists, about incorporating Greenland into the so-called Golden Dome. There's really no strategic national defense security sort of issue with the current status. And when it comes to the economic side of things, yes, Greenland has lots of critical minerals and whatnot, but they're very difficult to
Sure.
access under meters and meters of ice. Perhaps at some point in the distant future, they'll be readily accessible, global warming and all that, but
Right.
not for the foreseeable future. So I think the chattering classes are generally a little bit flummoxed by the signals coming out of the White House. Marco Rubio has kind of settled people's nerves. At least we're not talking about military action, but even purchasing the island
Right,
seems a
right.
bit bizarre too.
And let's
Yeah.
talk about that because apparently Trump wants to spend as much as $700 billion. I'm curious, A, where they got that number and how that would come about, and what would the U.S. get for its money?
Well, apparently it's just the sort of back of the envelope. The Danish government subsidizes Greenland to the tune of $700 million a year. So you multiply that by X number of years and you get something in that ballpark. And then benchmarked against the amount that the United States transfers to various other territories that are not really part of the U.S., but connected to it economically in some way, shape, or form. So it's meant to be an attention grabber, an eye
Yeah.
popper, and I think it serves that purpose. What would they get for it? Um, well, they're not going to be able to buy it directly, the island directly from the Danish government. That's clear. The other option is in the not too distant future, if the Greenlandic people decide to become independent, and then perhaps to use that money to make them an offer they can't refuse,
Mm,
as it were.
yeah.
Sort of buy their votes. But the Greenlandic people have already signaled that that's not really a viable option either. The status quo is the best option in all respects, and everything else merely erodes and undermines alliance solidarity
Right.
within NATO. It's actually quite counterproductive, all this chatter.
You know, Andrew, I spent about a month in Greenland several years ago. I was surprised, A, how little room there is to build any kind of houses or anything like that. And secondly, there's only 50,000 people in the whole island, and 85% of those are indigenous. So let's talk a little bit more about the makeup and the Greenlandic and Danish officials. Apparently, from all indications, the meeting at the White House did not go well. So what now?
Well, it remains to be seen if cooler heads prevail, and I'm thinking Marco Rubio in this context, then this issue will go away. I don't think we're going to see anything like Venezuela. I don't think we're even going to see the escalation of rhetoric that we're seeing in connection with Iran at the moment. I think initially the president, I think, misspoke or
Mm,
spoke without really thinking about it. And then he became vested in the issue in a way that he's just dug his heels in. But I think this will blow over. Cooler heads will have to prevail. There is no way forward in terms of annexing Greenland to the United States, and there's no need for it. So no motive,
right.
no means, no opportunity, no crime.
Yeah, indeed. And one other thing when I was there is the Greenlandic people really seem to respect, admire, and like its Danish leadership as well. So talk about that a bit. And also Greenland's location, its natural resources, and how its role in global trade routes and supply chains evolved and perhaps only become more important.
Well, as the Arctic ice cap recedes, and that's a demonstrable fact. There's no arguing about that. The North Sea route, top of Russia, is becoming increasingly open, especially to Chinese trade to Europe. It cuts out a lot of choke points and it cuts out a lot of distance. And then there's the Northwest Passage. The Canadians think it's internal Canadian waters. The
Right.
Americans think it's international waters. And then there's just going to be access to a lot of critical minerals and commodities like that. The Arctic is opening up. And that means in an era of great power competition, there's going to be some pushing and shoving. Russia, the United States, and China declared itself in 2018 a near-Arctic power. They're all going to be vying for advantage, jockeying for position. In that respect, Greenland
Right.
is really important, at least when viewed from a North American perspective. It is part of the North American sort of defense ecosystem. But has always been treated that way, at least since the Cold War kicked off in 1951.
Right.
It's always been treated that way. And that brings it back to economics. And there's really not much there in terms of the time and energy that's being devoted to discussing annexation for very little return economically. It just seems, again, perplexing to a lot of people who watch the Arctic security picture evolving,
Yeah.
and Greenland is not really a problem.